Conservation is most commonly defined as wise use of our natural resources. On the spectrum of land use, conservation falls between preservation and full urban development. And in the middle somewhere is the perfect hybrid of both, which is the most sustainable outcome for our environment as humans, but also the most economically sustainable environment for us as well. At the Land Conservancy, we look and seek to protect all environments, not just natural areas or working farms or urbanized areas, but everything in unison so that we can coexist with our natural resources, and our land use practices emulate exactly how we want to be, which is the sustainable approach to what we do. So to protect our landscapes, we've realized at the Land Conservancy that we need to not only protect the natural areas, but also the areas that are working lands for farms and forests, and also our urban corridors. There's often battles between urbanization and natural resource protection, but we find that if we do it correctly, a sustainable community will have a perfect balance of those. Studies show that we want kind of a third of residential development, a third of commercial industrial development, but also a third of open space in any given community that lends itself to the protection of the values and the resources that we hold, the communities that we want to stay in, the communities that will retain our youth and not let them go to other communities once they grow up here. We've invested everything in them and have them move to a different community. So not only are we protecting communities that are in the front line of where the urban development is happening, we're also going back into urban communities that have gone through this already and putting the green infrastructure in place to bring them back up to a sustainable level. The Western Reserve Land Conservancy is a nonprofit conservation organization that is dedicated to protecting the natural resources and making thriving communities in Northeast Ohio. We have a 20-county footprint, basically from the Lake Erie Islands over to Conneaut down to Steubenville. We've created at this point, as of today, 150 or so parks. We've protected 62,000 or more acres through conservation easements and land acquisitions, and we've completed over 750 different projects. In any given year, we protect 4,000 to 5,000 acres and complete about 40 to 50 conservation transactions throughout all of our communities, not just in the natural areas or the working farms, but also in the urban corridors.
Thank you to Mr. Brett Rodstrom for that great introduction into the work that the Land Conservancy does. And my name is Alex Chaka. I'm really excited to be here today to present to the Land Bank Conference. I will say, as a primer, just bear with us. This is the first for many of us going through this virtual presentation. We hope we're going to do great. We're not sure, but please bear with us. I'm really excited to share with you some of the work that we're doing in conjunction with our partners and land banks specifically. So just a real quick intro, tell you a little bit about myself to get you to know me a little bit better. Since we're virtual, I feel like we need to do that just so we all get to know each other a little better. As I said, my name is Alex Chaka, Senior Vice President for Conservation Transactions for the Western Reserve Land Conservancy. I've been with the organization about 7 years, really love what we do. And just a fun fact, I guess, about me, I recently was married and I have 3 dogs. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to my co-presenter, Mr. Bob Owen, and he will talk a little bit about presentation today.
Thanks, Alex. And yes, thank you to everyone. Thanks for attending this. And as Alex says, please stick with us, but we're hoping we do a pretty decent job of this. So as Alex indicated, my name's Bob Owen. I'm General Counsel for Western Reserve Land Conservancy. I've been in-house counsel with the Land Conservancy for 15 years now and General Counsel since 2011. Prior to joining the Land Conservancy, I was in private practice, focused mostly on municipal, environmental, and real estate law. And as an in-house counsel for the Land Conservancy, I get to use some of those, but I also have the opportunity to engage in a vast array of legal issues, nonprofit corporate work, taxation, the real estate, conservation, environmental issues, employment law, and other public sector issues. Of course, the focus, because we're a land conservation organization or land trust, that focus is primarily on conservation and real estate law. During my 15 years here at the Land Conservancy, I've been involved in literally hundreds of real estate transactions that have resulted in the conservation of tens of thousands of acres, including natural areas, agricultural resources, and even in the urban context. I'm fortunate enough to have worked with folks like Alex and others within the Land Conservancy to really bring about some real amazing conservation and to be able to tie that into just improving and resulting in thriving communities across northeastern Ohio in our footprint. So that's enough about me. I just wanted to take a moment though and kind of talk a little bit about what this presentation is and kind of where we're going with it. First of all, Alex will be doing a large portion of the presentation on this. I'm really here as kind of color commentary and to answer some questions here and there, but I'm sure he'll do a great job with that. So before he gets started though, I just want to give you a little bit of background on what a land trust really is and what it does. Brett mentioned a little bit in that video, but generally, you know, a land trust or a land conservancy is a private nonprofit entity, generally has tax exempt status under the Internal Revenue Code 501c3. Of course, if you don't have that status, your donations won't be tax deductible. So that encourages most to obtain the exemption. A land trust has a mission and a purpose, which is generally to ensure the availability of essential natural assets, that being forested land, water resources, agricultural soils, and doing that through conservation and restoration of those assets. So the goal is really land related and natural resource related. The conservation that's done by a land trust is generally through the placement of restrictive covenants on land that limit the use and development of the land. And we primarily do that through a document known as a conservation easement and or through deed restrictions. Generally, you know, when we're working on transactions, we're working through negotiated real estate transactions. And they're always with of course, a landowner involved and then some end takeout partner or entity that's going to own the property and for the long term. So again, the purpose of a land trust is always conservation of the natural resources and the assets that are out there. So I think what we're looking at doing here as part of this presentation is talking about how we or other land trusts out there in the community can help and partner with land banks to realize you know, conservation of parcels that are appropriate for that. Of course, I don't need to get into the details with most of you folks as to what a land bank is, but you know, generally you're acquiring properties through either abandonment, tax delinquency, something along those lines, hopefully strategically, but not always. And the acquisition is always with the expectation of improving the economic or aesthetic quality of the community and through, you know, repurposing the land for the elimination of blight, et cetera. And I think if you think of it from that context, based on what I mentioned about land trusts, I think you can see where there might be an overlap there. There certainly are opportunities where land conservation in partnership with a land bank, you know, can really improve the economic and aesthetic qualities of the communities that we're both working in. So that's what we're hoping to get through today. And, you know, Alex and I are going to be answering questions throughout. Because this is a virtual format, questions will come in the form of the chat function on the Zoom presentation. And we'll be monitoring those throughout. And if questions come up that we feel need a quick response to, we'll handle those in real time. Otherwise, we may hold them and do a brief Q&A at the end of the presentation. Finally, and last but not least, the Land Conservancy did apply for the continuing legal education for this program. So periodically throughout the program, you're going to see poll questions that are going to pop up on the screen. And we just ask that everybody, even if you're not looking for the CLE credit, respond to these because there's some interesting questions. Certainly if you're looking for the CLE, it's something that you will have to do. So That's it. I'm going to let Alex take it away, but thank you, and I look forward to this.
Thanks, Bob. Yeah, really excited to get into this presentation with you all today. And as Bob said, you know, the real goal for us as the Land Conservancy here in this presentation is that we want to create an awareness about some of the work that we do, but the work that we do in partnership with land banks and other entities, whether it's a local municipality or a local metro park. We want to just create awareness about some avenues that we could pursue with you, or you could pursue with other land trusts in your region that might be beneficial to you, whether it's via land conservation, whether it generates some revenue for the land bank, and a couple different scenarios like that. So the first part of the presentation will be a general overview that I'll try to breeze through because I think some of you probably have seen some of this, just general information about the organization. And then we'll get into 3 kind of case examples that the Land Conservancy is currently engaged in that involve a land bank at some level. So the mission of our organization is to provide the people of our region with essential natural assets through land conservation and restoration. You know, that, as Bob stated, that's kind of the goal of this organization region-wide. So the Land Conservancy was founded really on natural areas preservation. So we were founded as Green River Land Conservancy in the late 1980s, volunteer-led land trust. It was really focused on natural areas, so woods, wetlands, ravines, stream corridors, that type of thing. As the organization has grown, we have expanded our scope of work immensely. So we now protect a lot of agricultural land, as Brett alluded to in the intro video. We've protected almost 30,000 acres of agricultural land within our region. Obviously, while we're here today, we launched an urban revitalization program that Jim and many of our staff at Thriving Communities have led and done an amazing job with that. And you know, obviously, as land banks, you're all here because of Jim and their work statewide to create these land banks and create an avenue to deal with this urban blight. So, and then lastly, we've really gotten into restoration. So restoration can mean restoration of homes, you know, urban communities, but also restoration of natural resources in our more rural areas. So again, Brett alluded to this in the video, but our service area is 21 counties. This is it. So it goes from the Pennsylvania border on the east side out to the Lake Erie Islands to the west and down to Jefferson, Columbian, and Carroll counties. So just real quick on our service area, when you start at the Pennsylvania line driving west into Ohio and then you drive all the way to the Lake Erie Islands, you might notice that the landscape, the demographics, they change vastly from east to west. You know, you enter Asheville County, maybe in the southern portion, it's very agriculturally dominated. Very rural. You move into Chaka County that contains some really high quality natural resources, wetlands, kettle ponds, things like that. You move into Cuyahoga County, which obviously is very developed, a lot of residential activity, commercial, industrial. And then as you start to go west again, it really turns into more of an agriculturally dominated landscape. So the reason I'm stating that is it's important for us as a Land Conservancy to not use the same tool in different parts of our service area. You know, agricultural easement on the west side might not work in Cuyahoga County, or natural areas preservation in Geauga County might not work in northern Huron County, where there just really isn't that. So we try to be really cognizant of what really is best for the community and have enough tools in the tool bag to provide what is the best for the community and let them tell us really what that is. So we put this slide together to just create an awareness of land trusts throughout the state of Ohio. We're not saying that we're able to work on every transaction that might come across our desk in the state of Ohio, but we're saying that there's several land trusts in the state, and if you have an opportunity in your county or your community, maybe this slide helps you get directed to them and start the conversation, and maybe it goes somewhere from there. But you can see in the Northeast, we cover kind of the Northeast majority of the property, but there are several other land trusts throughout the state in the different colors, and you can visit the Land Trust Alliance website to help guide you to this, or reach out to anyone from Western Reserve Land Conservancy, and we'd be happy to put you in touch with our colleagues across the state. So Bob?
So here's the first of our poll questions, and the question is there a land trust in the county you work in? We'd appreciate if you just take a moment to answer that, and I think we're going to be able to get the tally to the results of this poll question afterwards, and maybe we can talk about it a little bit if Alex thinks that's appropriate.
And this question is not aimed at Western Reserve Land Conservancy spreading across the state of Ohio just yet, but we really are just curious. We really are curious on how many folks are in the audience that might be able to engage in a conversation based on what we're able to share with you today. So we've got one response via the chat that a person does not have a land bank in their county. Hopefully here in a couple seconds, we'll be able to show the poll results, just to get a kind of general feeling for how many folks have land trusts in their communities. Okay, so showing on the screen is that 59% of folks in the audience have a land trust in their county. That's really great to hear. 17% do not. So we hope that maybe a new one's developed or an existing one expands to include a county that you work in. And then 24% are not sure. So we'd be happy to answer those questions about whether there is one in your county or community or not. So feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. And thank you for completing the poll. So to kind of quickly summarize the Land Conservancy, just some general facts about our region. It's very large, about 5 million acres, has 165 miles of Lake Erie shoreline, which is probably the or one of the most unique natural assets that a state has. And, a lot of states don't have something like this, so it's something that we try to protect every day of the week. Over 21 counties, a lot of people, almost 5 million people within our service area, so it's not always just about land. Sometimes it's about urban revitalization or planting trees. It really depends on the community that we're working in. In a lot of different watersheds, the Lake Erie watershed, in the Mississippi River watershed, so our service area kind of straddles the divide, which is pretty unique. Accomplishments from the Land Conservancy through today, we've created more than 160 public parks, over 10,000 publicly accessible acres in partnership with all of our partners throughout our region, over 220 working farms, almost 30,000 acres of protected farmland, 785 properties, in a total of over 62,000 acres. So this is the impact we've had to date, but we're not slowing down. We see a lot more work to do, and we're excited to do it. So where do we start? Today, we're not going to get too much into the urban revitalization efforts. Bob and I certainly aren't the experts on that. Jim, Isaac, and folks in our Thriving Communities office are really the experts there. But we're really going to focus on our traditional land trust efforts and how there's overlap between that traditional conservation work and land banks and their ownership of property within our service area, but also within the state of Ohio. So tools that we use to maximize impact, and we'll get into each of these a little bit and just kind of give you examples of how this works. But there's not one single thing or one single funding source or one single relationship that we get conservation projects done with. It is always multiple layers of funding, multiple partners, and a lot of different things going on at one time to really achieve one product. So we have conservation partnerships with almost all of our local park districts, county park districts, municipalities, cities, townships. We've done projects with many of those folks. And then other nonprofit groups like Ducks Unlimited, the Nature Conservancy, Cleveland Museum of Natural History are all folks that we've done work with, and we pursue partnerships with them on a weekly basis. Local private philanthropic support, we're extremely lucky to have a robust development team. So we spend a lot of time, raising funds through individuals, through corporations, through foundations, whatever it might be, and to help further our mission both in the rural areas and the urban areas. And then kind of the bread and butter for our conservation work is federal, state, and local grants. There's quite a few opportunities to use local and federal grants to acquire or conserve land in our region, and we'll get into that a little bit more with the case example, but there's quite a bit of money available, and we try to leverage that whenever we can. And then existing community assets, this is where we'll kind of get into an example where, a land bank might own a parcel that's valued at $50,000, and that might leverage a much larger conservation project. So kind of taking what's already there and using it to leverage a much bigger vision. So examples of phone support, some of the big foundations and funders in our area. Just many of you may be aware of these, but these are some of the folks that we engage in to help push our mission along, both in the urban and rural arena. Conservation and community partnerships, like I said, we work with many entities, land banks, metro parks, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Ohio Division of Wildlife, Cleveland Metro Parks. Just there's really an endless amount of partners, and if there's somebody willing to talk to us about a conservation opportunity, we are all ears and happy to discuss, how we might be able to help. Please poll question 2. Does your land bank own a contiguous piece of land that is greater than 20 acres? So I'll explain a little bit why we're asking this question as you guys answer the question and the results are displayed. For the Land Conservancy, typically from a pure conservation lens, we are looking at properties that are 20 acres or larger. Kind of our internal policies and guidelines have led us to that conclusion that anything less than that becomes a real stewardship and long-term burden to monitor and maintain that is greater than the potential conservation of the property. So we have certainly done projects that are less than 20 acres if they have really astounding natural resources like a federally endangered species, like an Indiana bat or something like that. We may do a project that's smaller than 20, but 20 is kind of the threshold for a piece of land that we would put conservation restrictions on and hold them long-term and kind of commit to the conservation of that piece of property. So again, we have rules in place where we might do a project less than that, but we kind of take them all and assess them individually. So the poll results are in. 22% say yes. That's actually really good. I was expecting a smaller number than that. So those folks, if they're in our service area, we'd be happy to engage in conversations about if we could be helpful. 52% no, and that's fine. I think there'll be, opportunities in the future, most likely. So I guess one thing, as we're on this question, the Land Conservancy is certainly not saying that every piece of property that is in a land bank inventory should be conserved. That's really up to the land bank and up to the community. However, if that is something that the land bank would like to pursue, we are certainly willing to have a conversation about how you might be able to achieve that, whether it's with us or with another conservation entity. But I think that there are opportunities out there. So thank you all for answering those questions. That's great information. So just a summary of the public funding options. This is a long list, and I'm not going to go through it all. But the top, on the top left, there's kind of 4 major funding sources there that the Land Conservancy utilizes, annually. So all these funding sources are available annually. Typically, it's a year cycle. They don't all, the timing does not all line up, so that gets tricky when we're trying to put these complex transactions together. But the Clean Ohio Conservation Fund we'll talk more about in the case example, but it's a statewide bond initiative that provides funding for conservation of property. So it's something that we utilize daily, really, to conserve and buy land. The Ohio EPA's Water Resource and Restoration Sponsorship Program is an Ohio EPA fund designated really for high-quality water resources. Another fund that we utilize on an annual basis. We put a couple grants in about 2 months ago, so we're anxiously waiting to see the outcome of those. And then one other one I'll just mention quickly is the North American Wetlands Conservation Act. It's known as NAWCA. We have received funding, a $1 million grant from that fund. We're waiting to spend the money and kind of get through the grant administration, but another grant that we pursue kind of every couple years. But there's a list of them here that we utilize all the time, and they all kind of have their own little niche in terms of what kind of project that they'd like to see, and we understand that fairly well. So this is kind of, if somebody brought us a project, this would be, we'd look at this list and say, what do we think applies to your piece of land? one thing that's really important to us and how we prioritize our work is really based on natural resource attributes. So properties that have high quality wetlands, floodplains, steep slopes, listed species, restoration potential, really specific and unique habitats. Those are really things that that really catch our eye, and we really want to preserve those resources for generations to come. But as I said, sometimes they may not have those qualities or less than 20 acres. But there's also a really important open space opportunities where a property might be 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 or 15 acres, but it's next to a 35-acre public park, and that park is just getting overrun with use, and the local community needs more space. There's opportunities there where creating a publicly usable amenity next to an existing amenity, but it might not meet the acreage threshold, but it makes sense from a community planning and a recreation standpoint. Things like that we are happy to pursue with folks within our service area and brainstorm if they're outside of our service area. But those are kind of things that we're looking at when we see a property come across our desk, and whether it's something that we have the capacity and time and want to prioritize as a project. So real quick, existing community assets, just examples of how we can leverage those. We've got a couple examples of the land banks that we work with currently. City that we work with, we've recently done a project with the city of Euclid. Great project on the shore, Lake Erie. Really cool stuff. And then Russell Township, many other townships in our service area we partner with on a regular basis. So here's a really kind of cool visual of what we try to accomplish. And it's not always this complicated, but oftentimes it is. But a way that we can strategically leverage an asset. So let's just say a land bank has a 5-acre parcel, semi-rural area. They don't really have a use for it or a vision for it, but it's next to 250 acres of rural land that's currently for sale. And the Land Conservancy is looking at that land for sale, and they notice that the land bank has this parcel right next to this larger natural resource piece. So that might trigger a kind of conversation that we might be able to utilize that existing land bank parcel to leverage a much larger transaction. So for the purpose of this example, we're going to say that 5-acre land bank parcel appraises at $50,000. And the land bank it's in Asheville County, and they're super excited about the property the Land Conservancy might be able to buy next to it and work with the local metro parks to transfer the property. So we can utilize that. If the land bank thinks that this is a great thing for their community, you can utilize that existing parcel to help leverage a much larger project. So let's just say we get that much larger property adjacent to that land bank parcel under contract, and we have the right to purchase it. Then we go after the foundations in our local area and say, hey, we're trying to create this great thing for Asheville County. It will be a great public amenity. It's adjacent to a bike trail. Would you guys be willing to put some funds toward this? And they commit $150,000. So now we're up to $200,000 raised. So we would leverage that to $200,000. Typically, we have to leverage 25 to 50% for state and federal grants. In this situation, we're leveraging about 1/3. So we could use that $200,000 and get a $600,000, let's just say, Clean Ohio grant to acquire that adjacent property. And then we would go after a much larger, let's just say, Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, $2.4 million property. The property is next to, let's just say, the Grand River, and it has lots of wetlands, and it's part of what the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative is interested in. We can apply for a $2.4 million grant and leverage all those other grants below it for a total project of $3.2 million to acquire this really great conservation piece. And really the backbone of this whole project was this 5-acre, $50,000 valued land bank parcel that was adjacent to it that really created a springboard for us to get all these other additional funds to protect and acquire the properties and transfer them to whoever the long-term entity might be that manages as a public open space. So kind of a cool illustration of how we try to piece projects together as an organization. And I'm going to just go through this really quick. This is a really complex real-life example of how we did that with the 2015 NACA grant. But in the interest of time, I'd like to really get into our case examples. So, and this is overwhelming even for me to look at, and I was very involved in this project, so we'll just keep going. So, Bob, do you have anything that you want to add right now, or are you good?
No, I think I'm good, Alex. I guess I would just make the statement that with regard to that matching game that you mentioned, that's, as Alex said, it's so important to just have that initial piece of property to start with. And, of course, those can come from land banks or other sources. But I think that was a great example of how we can work together to leverage some funding to make some amazing, eliminate the issue of the land bank owning that parcel and turn it into, leveraging some substantial conservation.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Bob. So we'll get into 3 real-life examples that are happening in real time right now that all 3 involve the Land Conservancy, and all 3 involve, I guess at least 2 involve a land bank. One's really an opportunity, but the Codu property and the McKelvey Lake property are real-life examples of how we're partnering with a land bank and a local metro parks or a local municipality right now. So the first example is just an example of, I think a lot of us see this in a lot of different areas. This happens to be in Lake County in Madison Township, but it was a subdivision that was platted a long, long time ago, and probably not planned super well, but it's 98 parcels. It's 20 acres, so it's a relatively large area of land in a pretty residential and suburban area. Many of these parcels are tax delinquent. Some have been forfeited to the state of Ohio. But the real point of sharing this slide is I think we see this in a lot of different communities. And, if a land bank in this situation is willing and able to kind of step up and try to take control of this land, there's an opportunity to either work with us, or the local municipality, or the city, or the village, or whoever it might be, to, really create a plan for this piece of land that, in this situation has been sitting idle like this for decades. And if it's not producing any tax revenue to the local economy, maybe it's better to create a public park out of this that, 400 kids can walk to and enjoy the benefits of recreating outside. So this is not a real life example in that the Land Conservancy is currently involved here, but it's a real life example of where we see kind of these old platted subdivisions that in reality are probably never going to get built out. And if there's an opportunity, if there's taxes that haven't been paid, there might be opportunities here to create something out of nothing. So that's really the point of sharing this example. And we have another one that really has come full circle for us as an organization in the last year, which I don't know that we planned for it, but we can say we planned for it at this point, which is really pretty cool. So this is in Asheville County. It's just the county over from Lake. And I'm personally from Asheville County and know this area very well. This is not suburban Ohio. This is very rural. This is near the town of Dorset. So there's not a lot going on around here. It's agricultural, it's woods, and there's a couple residences mixed in. But again, you see this was platted a long time ago, many different owners, 100 different plats. And not really likely that this ever gets developed. There's all kinds of zoning and ordinance issues here from the county level. And a lot of these parcels, a portion of these parcels are already owned by Asheville County Metro Parks. So, we already feel like there's, a foot in the door in terms of creating something out of nothing here, because Metro Parks already own some of these parcels. And then you see on this map, there's green, yellow, and orange that are in foreclosure, and then the pink are tax delinquent. So if you put all those together, and you're assuming that that's all going to happen, and I understand that's a lot of work, but you put all that together, you're starting to create a pretty large mass of land that, in Asheville County, and in this particular area of the county, I don't know that it's ever going to be a great playground or splash park or anything like that, but it could be, a publicly accessible hunting area or wildlife area or something like that really fits the people of the region. So just another example of the things that are out there that we might be able to help, either get involved with creating match or acquiring land or protecting land, but really comes down to the local land bank and the local community and what they want to do. So ironically, here's another map of the area. The green here, right above the lettering that says Great Grand Lakes Metro Parks. These little green parcels are what Asheville County Metro Parks currently owns. And then over here to the right, you see an orange boundary around land that says Pymatuning Valley Greenway Metro Park. So the Land Conservancy actually recently just bought that piece of property. It's a little over 100 acres. We used Clean Ohio funding to purchase it. We immediately transferred it to Asheville County Metro Parks. So from a strategic planning standpoint and conservation planning standpoint, now there's kind of this anchor in this area that where this platted subdivision exists. It seems like you can add to that strategically, and I think a land bank could play a significant role in helping get some of those properties over to the metro parks, whether it's with the Land Conservancy or without them. We don't care about that, but there's a great opportunity here to create a corridor, a much larger corridor of land, which is something that we're always aspiring to create where it's right. And certainly here, there's a lot of forested land, wetlands, timber resources that could be protected and would be great to protect for the community. So overall, just to give you a sense of scale, this whole block, if all of that land that was platted was to be able to go to a land bank or the metro parks, would be over 300 acres. We're talking about a pretty significant chunk of land that could have a much better use than it currently does today. And I'll just quickly scroll through some of these maps. This is what we call a location map. So from a planning standpoint, not only is the property that we just acquired from Metro Parks adjacent to all these platted lots, some of which they own, but we're also starting to build up a corridor of protected land. So Dorset Wildlife Area is up to the north, and there's another wildlife area down to the south. Most importantly, though, the Pymatuning Valley Greenway runs directly through the middle of the property. So Asheville County Metro Parks has received funding in construction of this abandoned railroad to Greenway is underway. So from a strategic planning standpoint from the county, this is going to be a really great amenity to create more access to the trail and just have more public green space in the community that, again, whether it's a splash park or a playground or a hunting area, I think, that's ultimately dependent on what the local community and the metro parks would like to do. Just again, another quick map. Here's the platted area here. It's very obvious, adjacent to the property that we recently acquired with partnership with the metro parks. So that's the examples for Lake and Asheville County. This is a really exciting example to share, and I'm sure there's some folks from Trumbull County Land Bank in the audience. So I'll thank them in advance for their conservation ethic and for working with us on this property. So this property is in Trumbull County. We refer to it as the Codu property. It's 67 acres. It's in the village of Newton Falls in Braceville Township. It's got over a mile linear footage of the Mahoning River, over 26 acres of wetlands, and it's in close proximity to the village of Newton Falls. So I'll get kind of into the deal structure and how we're assisting here, but this project would not happen without the partnership, as I said, from Trumbull County Land Bank and also Trumbull County Metro Parks, who are the Land Bank is the current owner, and the Metro Parks are going to be the long-term owner. So without those two partners, this project's probably not possible. It's really a great example of how we can all work together for the greater good. A quick location map. So here's the location of the property. It's in just north of Newton Falls in Trumbull County. Just east, that big green blob is the Ravenna Arsenal. So that's not technically a legally protected piece of land. It is owned by the federal government, but we refer to it kind of as the park and managed area. But there is actually a fair amount of conservation that happens inside there with habitat management, young forest initiative management. So it is a significant piece of land in the state of Ohio because it's so large. And we're trying to build on that from a corridor standpoint. So here's a floodplain map of the property. So the hashed line indicates property that's in the floodplain. So you can kind of see the Mahoning River kind of runs through the northern part of the property. The whole entire 67 acres is in the floodplain. The blue area on the map shows wetlands. So from a planning standpoint and a land use standpoint, it seems like this was really a no-brainer in terms of conservation. It never really was going to be probably developed or shouldn't be due to the water resources and the flooding risk that would be here on this property. So the Land Conservancy was engaged with the land bank. This property is in the land bank's inventory currently. They got it several years ago. And we looked at it and said, man, this is a great opportunity to conserve some really high quality wetlands and river frontage along the Mahoning River. And so we struck up a conversation. Land Bank and the Land Conservancy agreed to terms via purchase and sale agreement where the Land Conservancy would buy the property. So we are currently under contract with the Land Bank for the 67 acres. Once we went under contract with them, we immediately started spending our time and resources trying to understand the property, doing our due diligence, doing natural resource surveys, bird surveys, fish surveys, ORAMs, which are a survey for wetlands, and really spending as much time as we could to prepare ourselves for the public grant cycles that were upcoming. So in this particular scenario, we went to the Clean Ohio Conservation Fund to apply for the funds to purchase the property off Trumbull County Land Bank. So that's a competitive process. It's not guaranteed. And that's really why we do so much due diligence going into it, is we want to document the property as best we can. We knew we had a good property. I mean, we do this every day, and we can kind of see from an aerial map whether it's going to be a pretty competitive project or not. So we were pretty confident right away that this would be. So we put in the Clean Ohio grant on behalf of Trumbull Metro Parks. They were extremely excited to partner with us and to take ownership of this property if we were successfully awarded funding. Thankfully we were. We got lucky and received the funds. So currently the land bank still owns the property, but it's essentially a formality of closing. We're working to buy the property, and we expect to close on it in a couple months. The property would be immediately transferred to Trumbull Metro Parks, and then they'll decide what exactly they want to do with it, whether, again, it's going to become a public hunting area, whether they'll install a parking lot and a trail, whether they want it to be a nature preserve. It's really up to them to decide what to do, as long as it's in line with the Clean Ohio funding, which was used to purchase it. So really great example. Really excited to see this get finalized, and high five to folks in Trumbull County, and hopefully find the next opportunity. So, the grand vision and goal is to create a new public amenity for Newton Falls. This was an obvious conservation piece because of the floodplain, the wetlands, and, those of you that are familiar with this area, as you enter Newton Falls from the north on Route 5, you kind of come down a pretty scenic wooded corridor now, and this property is right there. So we're preserving that, which I think is cool for people that drive that a lot. It's always, at least in my opinion, nicer to look at trees than it is to look at buildings. So we're trying to preserve that for the future.
Okay, here we are at poll question 3. How many times a week do you visit a public park? Again, if you take the time to go ahead and respond to that, it would be greatly appreciated. But one of the reasons we're asking this question in particular is you may or may not have noticed with the whole COVID-19 issue that has come up, the pandemic, parks have really seen a substantial 100-fold increase in visitation. And so we're interested to see if any of you are part of that, frankly. And it also shows how important it is to produce and do these transactions so that they can result in parks that are accessible to the public. Hopefully we'll have a response here in just a moment.
Bob, why don't you share with folks how many times a week you go to a public park?
Generally about 2 to 3 at this point. And the reason for that is, first of all, to get outside so we're not cooped up, but also we have a dog that we love to take, and he loves to enjoy the parks with us.
It's awesome. So we received our results. We've got 43% that go 1 time a week, which 1 time is better than none, so that's awesome. And then another 40% approximately of folks that go 2 to 4 times, which is really great. And as an organization, there's so many human health benefits to getting outside and recreating in nature that this is something that the organization, Western Reserve Land Conservancy, has taken a strategic approach as a result of COVID-19, and we've actually fast-tracked the opening of some of the properties that we own to public access, which was part of our strategic plan, but we hoped to take a little bit more time to do it. But we didn't think we had a choice. We're located in Cuyahoga County next to Cleveland Metro Parks, our headquarters, and we noticed, as Bob said, just these Metro Parks were overrun. There was no parking space at the parking lot. So as a strategic response, we thought, we've got 6,000 acres that we own. Let's try to make some of those accessible as fast as we can to create more opportunity. And it's been really awesome to watch our staff, really get into the ditches and create these opportunities. It's not really super easy to do with trails and parking lots and signage and monitoring and maintenance and all that stuff. So it's been really awesome to see. And check out our website. We've only got 3 that we just opened, but it's the beginning. And I think there's some pretty cool opportunities. So if you're in Northeast Ohio, check those out and let us know what you think. So the last case example is another active project the Land Conservancy is deeply engaged in at this point in time. It's the McKelvey Lake project in Mahoning County. Really, really unique opportunity the Land Conservancy is engaged in. Not every day do we come across an opportunity where we have the chance to conserve 400 acres in a fairly major city in the state of Ohio. It's just those opportunities don't really exist. So this is 400 acres in the city of Youngstown. The eastern edge of the property borders the city limits. But really a big piece of land, contains a 125-acre lake that you see here in the blue. So not only is it a big piece of land, but it contains an asset that, I think a lot of municipalities, cities, villages, you would really die to have a lake in your community that, you're able to recreate on is a huge asset. So that's what we're currently working towards. Here's an aerial map of the property. Again, about 400 acres in the city of Youngstown. The map doesn't show that it seems super developed, but I promise you, as soon as you get off that map, it is pretty developed. So there's a lot of people that will be within walking distance of this property and this park once we're able to complete the transaction. So it's kind of the overview and the summary of where we're at and how land banks could be involved here. The last example was pretty clear. The land bank was selling land, we were buying land, and we were transferring it to the local metro park. This is a little bit different, but it's more of an after-the-fact planning and strategic approach to access to the property. I've talked mostly about this. It's 400 acres. The Land Conservancy has been awarded Clean Ohio funding, so we have the money. We're ready to buy the property. We're doing this in partnership with the city of Youngstown. They will be the long-term owner of the property. So we just have some last few remaining documents that we need to get tidied up and executed. And, we hope to get this transferred over to the city in the next couple of weeks. So this is happening, right before our eyes. And we've been working on this for a super long time, probably going on 6 years. So it's been a long road to go, but we're really excited, and we've recently engaged in some community engagement. My colleague Jackie Gillen has really been leading that, and the people on the east side of Youngstown are just super jazzed about what this could be. So it's great stuff. And we kind of look at it as an organization. We don't pretend to really know what's best for the east side of Youngstown. So it's been great to get input from Youngstown Neighborhood Development Corporation and Mahoning County Land Bank. Both those entities have just been super helpful in helping us get to the point where we're at today. And, at the end of the day, we looked at it and we're like, if we can just make this publicly accessible for people to fish, because today it's not. It's owned by a corporation and it's not open to the public. And if we can just open it up for people to go fishing, what a win that might be for all the people that could walk there, in 10 minutes and throw a line in the water and just enjoy nature. So we hope a lot more than that happens, but that's the current process we're in planning right now with the city and the residents. But where land banks get involved here is, I think, like I said, once we acquire the property and transfer to the city, I think there's an opportunity here to work with 2 land banks, actually, a city land bank and the Mahoning County Land Bank, who, as I said, have been great supporters. Gary and Deb have been just amazing supporters of us and the work that we're doing, and we greatly appreciate that. But so that the McKelvey Lake property is in the red outline here, you see the lake in blue. So there's two properties essentially here owned by a city land bank and a county land bank. So the property on the north, the northerly black arrow, there's, I don't know, 5 or 10 acres there that are owned by the city land bank. So once we acquire this property, the access to the lake is actually not that great currently. There's some areas down to the southeast that are actually more accessible than the areas on the west side of the lake. So, you know, in partnership, and we're having these conversations now with the two land bank entities, we feel like, you know, those current land holdings, whether it's the city land bank, the property to the north or the north arrow, or the county land bank, which owns the property where that black arrow is to the south, which happens to be right on a main road and also right next to the water's edge, and could create a really nice access point to the water, whether it's a boat ramp or just a parking area and a picnic area. You know, we're not sure really what that is yet, but, you know, engaging in these conversations and just, you know, making sure that the Land Conservancy is doing its part to communicate effectively to the partners of the area to leverage, you know, the work that we're doing to create even create an even better amenity that is more accessible than it would have been without these land bank parcels that we're showing on the map right now. So, you know, there's more to come on this one, but you know, we're super excited. This is a monumentous project for the east side of Youngstown, and you know, we're really excited to get it done. So that is it.
Alex, I was just going to mention we have a couple of questions that have come in through the question and answer function.
Great.
So I think both of these certainly fall into your territory, so I'll just ask and you can respond.
Okay.
One attendee asks, can you define a floodplain, and does that mean the property floods? What does it, or does that mean it is on a river?
It means both. So it means it's on a river or a stream or a water course, and yes, it does flood. You know, there's a couple of different ways to define a floodplain. There might be, you know, some government entities might call it a 50-year floodplain or a 25-year floodplain or a 100-year floodplain. And how you know that, and there's maps available typically at your county, but if you don't have access to those, we could help with that. We do create maps for every project we work on, and we have that data. We have GIS folks on staff that are really good at that type of thing and defining whether or not it's in a floodplain. Of course, from a legal standpoint, I'll speak for Bob. We don't want to be providing a legal opinion for anybody on what's floodplain and what's not, but we can suggest what we think is and what we think might not be. But and we can help find that data if you can't access it.
Okay, thanks, Alex. Next question is, how many Clean Ohio NRACs are there in Ohio? And do some of these districts not use the full allocation of money? And first, Alex, I think you might want to explain what an NRAC is.
Yeah, great question. So NRAC, N-R-A-C, stands for Natural Resource Assistance Council. So these are local councils put together for the Clean Ohio Conservation Fund to administrate the funding process for their jurisdiction. So, for example, let's just say District 1. District 1 just happens to be Cuyahoga County, but not all districts are one county. Like District 18 down in the southeastern part, and sorry that I'm looking away, but I just happen to have a map in my office that clearly illustrates all these NRACs. But some NRACs, like NRAC 18, have 10 counties in them. It's in a more rural area, and so there's a kind of a map of the different NRACs that's available on Ohio Public Works Commission's website. And to the question of, are the funds always used up? Really depends on the NRAC. So some NRACs are really heavily loaded with conservation organizations like us. Let's just say Cleveland Museum of Natural History, Portage Parks, Lake Parks, all these different park districts. So I'll give you an example of that in real time here. NRAC 7 is Lake, Asheville, Trumbull, and Portage counties. So there's pretty well-developed park districts in every one of those counties. There's the Nature Conservancy, the Western Reserve Land Conservancy, Cleveland Museum of Natural History, Holden Arboretum, and a lot of conservation organizations, Cleveland Metro Parks. So that round, typically there is not a lot of money left over because there's more projects than there is money. However, some other NRACs throughout the state of Ohio have a harder time using the money up for whatever reason, whether it's because there's entities applying for it or there's not as many opportunities to conserve land. So it's not guaranteed to be used up every time, and some NRECs don't use up the money more often, but it's really hard to say. And you know, as an organization, we're trying to do as much as we can. So we're, you know, going to the NRECs in our service area and applying for whatever opportunities we have on the docket.
Thanks, Alex. The next question is, we don't have a land conservation organization in our county. Can we work with WRLC?
Whoever asked that
Maybe.
question, can you tell us what county from?
I think while we're waiting for that, Alex, I think, you know, the answer really truly is maybe. It really depends on the proximity to our service area. It depends on whether or not we can work with other partners in the area, what kind of transaction it might be, or what the property involves. So there are a number of questions that come from that question that is asked. But I think if somebody has a specific county they want to ask about, we certainly can respond directly to that.
Yeah, for sure, Bob. I agree. However, your answer could be different than my answer.
Of course it is, Alex. It always is.
But yeah, we'd be interested to see where it's at and try to help whoever it is to come up with, you know, brainstorm whatever we can to help if we can. We have to look at each of them individually.
Yeah. Okay, Alex, the next question is, before we apply for Clean Ohio money, does our land bank have to own the property? Can we wait to foreclose until after we have the grant funding?
So Bob, I might ask you to chime in a little bit here, but so if a land bank owns the property, you can't necessarily apply for Clean Ohio funding for that property because you already own it. So
right.
In the second case example, the land bank owns the property, but Western Reserve Land Conservancy is buying the property off of the land bank. So land bank's not applying for the funding. Western Reserve Land Conservancy is buying the property, acquiring the property, and then transferring it to Metro Parks. So the land bank can't necessarily, and Bob, I don't know from a legality standpoint if they're eligible from a Clean Ohio standpoint. I'm not sure a land bank is an eligible entity to apply for it itself.
I would say that it's not likely an eligible entity to apply for the Clean
Right.
Ohio funding. And I would even also wonder, you know, what would be the benefit to the land bank purchasing a piece of property. I think in most cases it comes through abandonment or tax foreclosure or something along those lines. I think the examples Alex has been giving with regard to the Clean Ohio is funding or any other funding is really a situation where the land bank is looking to monetize the property that they have in their ownership and can do that through whether it's a conservation organization or a park district or some other entity that does qualify to apply for it and can, you know, be the acquisition entity for the property and maybe a long-term owner.
And yeah, let me just build on that real quick, Bob. And so yeah, they're trying to monetize an asset in their inventory, but they also believe in conservation and they believe in the ultimate goal for the property. So, you know, the sole motivation shouldn't be monetization, because at the end of the day, it might not be what you want from an end use, because it can't be developed, it can't be subdivided, it can't be built out. So you really got to think that through when you engage with a land trust and make sure that it's something that you think fits for the community.
Yeah. Okay. I think,
Alex and Bob,
just about...
you guys did a great job.
Thank you, Jim.
I appreciate it. And we will, at the conclusion of this one, we're letting everybody know we got a 10-minute break before our next panel. And really, you guys really did a superb job. You clarified a lot of things for me, by the way. And congratulations, Alex, on the closing of McKelvey Lake any day now. And I know you've only worked on it your entire career. So listen, thank you. And at this point, we're going to break. If it's okay, unless there's any other questions, I don't see any. We'll just come back in about 10 minutes.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.